Welcome to another episode of the Vikingology podcast. I'm Thing One, CJ Adrian.
And I'm thing too, Terry Barnes. I was wondering last night in the middle of the night, like, is he going to do the thing again?
I read it every night to my kid, right? Thing One and Thing Two, have dinner on Mars.
Uh,
Uh, and today we have some fun guests that I first encountered on another podcast, Ian Stewart Sharp's When the Wolf Comes, which was an actual play podcast of his role playing game. And these two characters appeared in an episode where my character, Gigi, was thrown back in time to the time of Beowulf. And they appeared on the show as experts on medieval literature, sagas, and so forth, and as two characters that were unwittingly and unwillingly thrust into the plot.
And then fairly rapidly thrust back out of it again.
And then,
Yeah.
as we did on that show, thrust back out. So today we have John Sexton, who is a professor of English at Bridgewater State University and specialized in medieval literature and history. Now, I got this from your guys' website, so if you didn't update your website, this isn't going to go so well. And Andy, you're going to have to help me with the pronunciation of your last name.
It's Fringer.
Fringer, thank you. So Andy Fringer is the Director of Interdisciplinary and Multidisciplinary Studies at the University of Mississippi. Welcome, John and Andy.
Thank you. It's good
Thanks
to
for
be
having
here.
us.
Nice to see you again, CJ.
So I thought we would start with going back in time again together to the
As we always
podcast
do.
that we did with Ian, and he had us doing the Legend of Beowulf, and there was a little bit of a snafu where it was my character, forgot how the Beowulf story went.
Yes, I remember.
But I did want to kind of jump back a little bit because on the Saga Thing podcast. Oh, by the way, you guys are the host of the Saga Thing podcast. That's probably a big thing.
that.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, that's the main thing.
How did I miss that? I had my little notes thing, and then I just kind of went for it. But it says in there that you speak mostly about the Icelandic sagas. But do you consider the Beowulf literature to kind of be in a similar sphere, or how does that tie into your focus and
Do you want
expertise?
the quick answer or the long answer? The quick
This is
answer is probably, for me, no. I don't consider it to be the same.
right.
I think it really depends on how wide a net you're willing to cast, right? I mean, there's a sort of category of Northern European literature, there's a category of Scandinavian literature, there's a category of Icelandic literature. If you're willing to cast a wide enough net, we can fit Beowulf in there, but it's a pretty wide net.
Yeah. Well, and also chronologically speaking, like Beowulf is a very, very old text. It may draw on the sagas may draw on some of the same tropes that have survived throughout the centuries. But Beowulf comes long, long before the sagas are ever written down or even conceived of.
So what I'm
But are
hearing
they part of the
is
same tradition? Maybe.
what I'm hearing is that Ian thrust you into the wrong time period.
No, not at all. Not at all. And also that's a work of kind of like science fiction. So
Yeah.
anything goes, right? So it's
Right.
all good.
I mean, really anything goes because then the dragon was actually what was it? Some kind of
Right, it was a mech, some
shape-shifting
kind of mech
alien creature.
thingy.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
Now I'm a dragon, and we're all like,
I
no,
didn't
it's
live
not.
long enough to find that part out, I don't think.
Well,
Hey,
I
then.
forget who it was, but one of the player characters launched some kind of black hole, and I got sucked into it
Yep,
in
that was
trying to
Steve.
kill the dragon. Yeah.
Yep, that was
Yeah,
his.
very
That
very
was the one
clumsy.
time he did something that was effective, but then it was so effective that it killed the rest of the crew.
Yes, it did. It was funny, at least.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so
I
let's
think
let. Oh, go ahead,
I
Terry.
was going to say, I think if I remember right, Tom Shippey, I was just reading not that long ago. What is it, Beowulf and something in the North before, or before the Viking Age, or whatever, the North before the Viking Age or something. Anyway, but he talked about maybe consensus being Beowulf was possibly composed around like the early 700s or something like that. So
Yeah.
you're talking what, like 600 or 700 years before, well, probably 500 or 600 years before some of the Icelandic sagas are written
Yeah,
down.
exactly. Like the sagas that we look through on the podcast, they're mostly written down in the 13th and 14th centuries, preserved in manuscripts that then are themselves edited into the 15th, 16th, 17th centuries. So that's a long, long story of how these texts survive. But yeah, they're 500, 600 years after the fact for Beowulf. Was Beowulf? There are some theories that the Beowulf narrative comes from Scandinavia. It's obviously set in Scandinavia, so there's a lot of questions about why is it written in Old English and how does that fit into the dating of the poem in some ways. But there's lots and lots of controversies and debates over that
Oh, yeah.
particular
And just to
subject.
complicate things a little further, the sagas that we study are mostly purport to be reporting events from the ninth and 10th centuries. And so the events they're reporting even postdate the theoretical writing of Beowulf, composing of Beowulf.
Yeah.
So it's a very different set of traditions. As Andy said, in a kind of very broad Germanic tradition sense, it's best to think of Beowulf maybe as the sort of embarrassing ancestor that nobody really wants to talk about, sort of, the great 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 uncle who lives somewhere else and nobody's heard from him in a very long time, kind of thing.
Okay, wait, I have a story about that then. So,
Uh-oh.
um, well, Shippey, although I will say in that book, though, just as another sort of note about that, is, I mean, his kind of central argument is answering that question, at least in part, of like, why is this supposedly an
Yeah.
Englishman or whoever, writing this and it's about Scandinavia? And he argues
Mhm.
that, well, because it's their history too, it's like these Germanic
Mhm.
people went over to Britain and
That's right.
the
Yeah.
rest is history kind of thing. Yeah. But so the period I'm working on is like 500 to 900, and my supervisor's always like, look at Beowulf, look at Beowulf. I'm like, all right, and so then
Yeah.
we have spoken with Judith Yesh on the podcast, and I
Yeah.
kind of know her a bit from some other stuff, and so I reached out to her and was talking to her, and I'm like, so what do you think? Because I'm not a literature person. I'm a historian, and I'm interested in the culture that Beowulf
Right.
describes. And I did have a friend, or do have a friend, who is a literature person and teaches a reading course on Beowulf. And so I was like, hey, so what do you think is the underlying culture that's being sort of described or portrayed? And what kind of field do you get a sense for who these people were? And he was like, I have no idea. Like he was like completely like, we read it line by line, we dissect the words. I was like, I don't know, And so I was like, and so
Oh,
then
that's
I
interesting.
reached out to Judith, and then she was like, yeah, look at Beowulf, but don't look too hard. She's like it's a
Yeah.
cottage industry. There's so much, controversy, like you just said. And then she's just like,
Mhm.
yeah, there's other stuff you could look at that's probably more appropriate. So I'm like, okay, I dispense with
Yeah,
Beowulf.
absolutely. Yeah, it just post dates the period that it's describing so much that it becomes difficult to figure out what exactly is realistic in there. Probably most of it is not realistic, but it does describe the warrior culture, I think, reasonably well. If you're trying to get a sense of what if we want to think about it, early Germanic or early Anglo-Saxon warrior culture, what that looked like, what their values were, I think you can get that kind of stuff out of it.
Yeah,
But day-to-day life, you're not going to really get
yeah,
that. But this is a problem we run into with the Icelandic sagas as well. Like John said, the sagas they're supposedly preserving the history and the stories of the settlement age up through the conversion to Christianity and a little bit beyond. But again, they're not written down until the late 12th, early 13th century. And by that time, we're dealing with, the transmission of oral narratives that are preserved in each of these areas. We're dealing with the invention of stories for a variety of purposes, whether that's political or religious, or just like we like our region better and we want to show how we're better than that region over there through our stories. We've got the better heroes. All of that kind of stuff complicates the narrative, which is why I think you're talking about the difference between how a historian looks at something and a literature person looks at something. I think John and I both chose medieval studies for our PhDs specifically because we knew that each of those different disciplinary angles is incomplete by itself. We wanted a more complete picture by exploring it from a variety of disciplinary angles, and that's my plug for interdisciplinary studies.
yeah.
Now
I would go
the
plug for Iceland because the Icelanders still feel that way.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're the
that's
real
right.
Scandinavians, and the Vikings are their people.
Right.
Now that actually segues really nicely into a question I had for the two of you. So you did meet in grad school before
Correct.
forming the Saga Thing podcast,
Mhm.
and you were fast friends, I imagine, sharing notes. But
Yeah.
do you wanna run us through kind of how you guys met, and was it a was that movie from Will Ferrell, Brothers? You know, are we friends now? We're
Step
friends
Brothers.
now. Was it? Yeah, Step Brothers. There we
I
go.
don't really remember Andy
Yeah,
from grad school.
yeah. I remember John. John was this mythic figure because he was there several years before me, and my memory is that he often would serve as I don't remember what your job was, but you were kind of like the liaison for students or chaperone for students in England.
Yeah.
And so in the medieval studies program at the University of Connecticut, I would hear about this guy named John, but he was often in England, and I thought that's a really cool thing. And then I feel like we first like really started hanging out when you recommended I take a Old Norse class.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure. I don't remember
Yeah, I think
exactly how it all
we
came
both
together.
had that interest already, right? We both were interested in the literature in the sort of region, but neither one of us by ourselves could convince any of the professors to run a course on the subject, and so we combined forces to try to get somebody to essentially let us teach ourselves about the Old Norse.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, not to take anything away from Bob, who helped us out tremendously. Uh, but we ended up, I mean, a lot of our study of Old Norse in grad school came down to Andy and I spending our time in class going over the stuff and then adjourning to a local bar or pizza place or what have you, and continuing to work on sagas well into the evening, and just sort of increasingly becoming fascinated and obsessed with all of the different possibilities, not just for doing our research in deeper directions, but also in, as Andy just said, all these ways that different disciplines came together in the study of the sagas, right? All the different things you had to know a little bit of in order to do this. And we're both, I think, dilettantes at heart. We like to learn a lot about a little about different things, and so
Hmm.
we were able to kind of bring all that to bear. And really, that became, I mean, one of the kind of mainstays of our grad school experience was this sort of obsessive trolling through the sagas together.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think Saga thing is in many ways a continuation of that. So we taught ourselves Old Norse as best we could with the help of our professor Bob Hasenfratz. And then we moved into reading the sagas together, starting off with just, simple family sagas, moving into contemporary sagas. And after we graduated, obviously couldn't get jobs being Old Norse scholars, especially we didn't have enough training, I don't think, to really claim something like that. So Saga Thing allowed us to continue studying the sagas ourselves in the same way that we were in graduate school. And at this point, I think we've read enough and we know enough scholarship that I think we're pretty well versed in what the sagas are all about. Wouldn't you say so, John?
Uh, I mean, that's a big claim to make in public, but sure.
It's a work in progress. It's always a work in progress, but I think we have a good sense of them.
Well, and the podcast grew in popularity, and
Hmm.
mostly based on your presentation, your approach. One of the things that I noticed is that sometimes you put the sagas on trial.
Yes.
Hmm.
And do you want to walk us through what that means and kind of how you approach that?
So that process is, we originally thought of this as a kind of a way of recording some lectures that would be for our students primarily. I mean, that maybe some people would be interested in it, but primarily we could then use them as a way to kind of prep our students, because almost no students in North America come to the sagas with any kind of prior information or experience. And so rather than us spending our time in the classroom just kind of introducing the concept and the island and the history and all of this stuff, that the saga would provide a way to kind of guide them through. The judgment thing was supposed to be just appended to the end of each episode as a kind of little jokey thing at the end to just kind of review some of the aspects of the saga that we just talked about. This was when we thought we were going to do one episode per saga. And that was 220 something episodes ago. And we still aren't done with the 40 Icelandic sagas. So
Yeah.
that fell apart pretty quickly, and the judgments became kind of their own animal.
Hmm.
CJ,
Yeah,
we
at
got a
the
long
in the
ways to go.
Yeah.
yeah. So in the judgments, we typically I guess the way we built it was to be fun and but a good way to review. So some of the fun things we do are look at best bloodshed. So one of the things that are attractive about the sagas is they often read like a cool action movie, and there are some pretty fantastic scenes where limbs are getting chopped off, and if you take yourself back to the the early days of watching action movies. John and I are children of the '80s and '90s, and there's lots of good action movies there with funny, interesting action sequences that are often followed up by good quips, good lines. So we
Well,
do
and there
Best
just aren't
Bloodshed,
that
where we
many. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
It's like there aren't that many literary experiences you can have in an English class where you get to debate seriously the merits of bisecting someone in half vertically or horizontally.
Yes, which is the better death. So yeah, we judge that. We judge notable witticism, so taking out those coolest lines. The sagas are very witty and very funny and very clever, and so we want to honor the those best moments. But we also talk about the antagonists and the protagonists and their motivations and who's better and who's worse and why they are the way that they are, and that allows us to exile someone. It allows us to bring someone in as our thingmen, who are our supporters, the best characters in the sagas. So we try to have a lot of fun. And there's another thing. John does nicknames and does a little scholarly dive on all the nicknames in the sagas for each of the texts that we are doing, and does a little bit of linguistic and cultural analysis of those nicknames. So lots and lots of fun to be had.
It has been one of the stranger side effects of doing the judgment section that we both, Andy's interest in topography and family lines, my interest in nicknames and disability, we end up inadvertently doing a fair amount of deep dive research. And I think
Hmm.
both of us at this point probably have multiple articles or at least notes that we probably should have written instead of just announcing publicly about some kind of obscure aspect of some saga or other because it's honestly the podcast feeds us. We get time to work on things that otherwise there'd always be something else that would get in the way of us finding the time for. The podcast pushes us to really take the time to do those deep dives that every scholar sort of wishes they could do on their subject.
Yeah.
Y'all don't do only
It-
just the sagas though, because I remember, I mean, I've been listening to you for a long time in a way that actually kind of interestingly, you know how when you listen to, I don't know, the radio or whatever, that you never know what these people look like, but so they're just these
yeah.
disembodied voices that you know. So it's kind of strange to see your faces.
Yes.
Not that your
Pretty
faces are
disappointing.
strange, but I have a distinct memory of I wrote an article that was related to the BJ 581 grave in Burqa,
Oh yeah.
which
Yeah.
kind of blew up in 2017, and I wrote
Hmm.
something in 2018, and I remember you had Charlotte
Yes, we
Hedenstern
did.
Johnson on, and you
Yep.
interviewed her, and I mean it's one of those weird things, like the imprints that you make in people's lives that you never know. I'm a runner. I can picture it in my mind. I was running across the Hawthorne Bridge in downtown Portland, and I
Yeah.
heard her say, "We actually don't even know what they considered a warrior to be." And I was like, "Ding, ding, 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 ding!" And I come home, like pounded out this
Oh,
article
that's
and
great.
stuff. So yeah, it was because of you guys.
That's fantastic.
That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the really cool things about the podcast is that it has opened the doors for us to have interesting conversations
Yeah.
with academics and professionals and enthusiasts in a variety of fields, that we might not if we just stuck to our, English literature or, whatever side of things. The podcast opens these doors for us to have cool conversations. So if stuff is happening in the saga or Viking world or medieval research world, if we can make time and make the connection, we're always happy to have a cool interview with people.
Right. I mean, we've gotten to talk to a number of literary scholars and historians, which has been fantastic. But we've also gotten to talk to a guy who does marine archaeology and then
Yeah.
sails around the world on Viking ships in his spare time. We've talked to the granddaughter of the man whose land was the location of Lanza Meadow in Newfoundland,
Yeah, we've
and
talked to
who is
Loretta. She's been on our
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
podcast. Yeah, she's
yes, who is
awesome.
now the director of
Yeah.
Parks Canada for that World Heritage Site.
Yep.
I mean, we've had some amazing conversations with people. We talked to historical recreation archery experts
That's right.
who
Yeah. Patricia.
we
Yeah.
have a standing invite at some point to show up in Vancouver and make our own bows. We just haven't made our way up there just yet.
It
But yeah,
sounds exactly
it's been
like what
tremendous
we're
experience.
doing, like entirely.
Yeah, exactly. It's just fascinating conversations, and then the relationships that grow out of that are
Yeah.
really rewarding. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like me and CJ, we didn't even know each other.
Mm.
And like one of my students wrote a paper and cited him. And I was like, who's this dude? And then I looked it
Yeah.
up and I was
Wait,
like,
so how did that
wait.
turn into a podcast?
Well, because I
Yeah.
was like, well, it was interesting because then I didn't, he had written a bunch of posts and stuff about various things. And my interest is at the early part of things. Like I said, that time period, I'm interested in the run up to the Viking Age. And so we had started with the whole sort of, kind of like what caused the Viking Age kind of stuff. And he had a really good post on his site about that. And so then I shared with him something I wrote. And then when we just zoomed and because then we figured out we were both in Oregon, which is completely like unreal for people to be a Viking Age specialist who's like,
Yeah.
whatever, a historian in like this side of the Mississippi. And then I noticed on his Wikipedia page that we're born on the same day. So then it was kind of starting to get like, Norns are involved or something in this. And so yeah, then after we messaged or after we zoomed, and I think we kind of hit it off. And so then it was like,
Mhm.
hey, we got good chemistry. What we should do a podcast and just sort of geek out, just with like almost
Mhm.
like the two of us, just kind of geek out on
Yeah. Yeah.
Viking stuff. And then he had already kind of a podcast going, and he was going to be taping one, and it was with William and Rayner, who do a lot of stuff with sagas as well. And so he invited me to join, and that was like what, a couple days after Christmas, already 3 years ago. And the kind of the rest has been history after that. But yeah, we've
Yeah.
meandered through a lot of stuff, like lots of top scholars. But then we had Ian Stewart Sharp on, and we have people who
Mhm.
write historical fiction, like CJ does, and month or two ago, we had the guy who's the captain of the ship, the Viking ship that got rebuilt in Washington
Oh,
State, and just yeah. So
cool.
it's like the complete gamut, like you guys too.
Yeah.
But
Well,
it's
I
so
know I always like we do we call the interview saga briefs. Is that what we call them? Saga briefs, yes. Saga briefs. And when we started doing those, they're so exciting and so interesting that it's very tempting to just want to do that a lot. And so you'll find like between sagas, we experiment with a bunch of different things. So we have our side project Whata Movie, where we review movies like Beowulf movies, especially. We do saga shorts where we talk about the short stories that are appended to the sagas. We do that's where we do our interviews as well, saga briefs. And so like between sagas we get to breathe a little bit, and then we also I think would like to explore so many different topics, more interviews, get more connections. But then we have these things, these sagas that we have to keep getting through. We're almost done. But the podcast is built around reviewing and studying the sagas.
yeah.
So we have to limit our interviews, but we sure love doing them. Yeah.
But the problem is we're dilettantes. We want to do a bunch of different stuff a little bit.
Yes, a bunch of little. Yeah.
So as far as the sagas that you're looking at, are you sticking with the Icelandic sagas, or are you branching out too to say some Snorri Sturluson stuff, some Heimskringla stuff, Poetic Eddas, and etc.?
Right. So when we started out, we decided that we were going to do the Icelandic family sagas first. Again, we originally anticipated that would take exactly 40 episodes. So we're still working on those 40 sagas.
Yeah.
But the plan was
So
always
damn
to
long.
then carry on, right? There's so many other genres of saga, there's so many other traditions. There is all the things that Snorri wrote. There are the contemporary sagas, there are the bishop sagas, the Radara saga. There's just an endless amount of material. And we've learned that we are very slow at getting through it. So the good news is we're never going to have to stop because there's always going to be more. We're at this point we're figuring on another year or two to finish up the family sagas, and
Hmm.
then we'll just pick another sort of branch to go through.
Yeah. Yeah, very tempting to do to follow since we're doing kind of the history of Iceland from the settlement period through the conversion. It's very tempting to pick up the contemporary sagas, which are the sagas written about the age that Snorri Sturluson lived in. He's one of the characters in those texts, It's written by his relatives. It's very tempting to continue that story of Iceland. Then again, there's all those other ones, like John said. The legendary sagas are really, really fascinating. That's where you're going to get stuff that sounds a lot more like Beowulf
Hmm.
in there, and a lot of analogs with Beowulf come up in the legendary sagas. We've also got the King sagas, like you said, the Heimskringla, and all the other King sagas out there. That's a really fascinating opportunity to go into the history of the Viking Age through those King sagas. There's also the knights sagas, the romance sagas, and then bishop sagas. John, I bet you're very excited to do bishop sagas, right?
I am actually.
Yes,
See, you're
exactly.
you're being a smartass, but I'm actually very excited to do some Mr. Sagas.
Some of them are interesting, but most of them are not, in my opinion. No
Yeah,
offense to all the
we
bishops.
had Peter Konechny from medievalist.net came on. That was a long time
Yeah.
ago already, right? He was one of our first guests, first probably 5 or 6 guests maybe, and he wanted to talk about the Stirlinga Saga.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
very interesting.
boy, it's gets brutal at that period of time in
Yeah.
Iceland.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I wanted to ask you, like, what are your thoughts on Snorri?
Our thoughts on Snorri. He's quite an
I have
interesting
Oh,
definite
let's
thoughts
character.
see.
about Snorri, and everybody has definite thoughts about Snorri, I think. So, what are yours?
Yeah.
We started off on the podcast. We started this sort of running gag of calling him the infamous Snorri Sturluson.
Hmm.
And recently we've had a couple of people kind of push back a little bit on that. And maybe it's a little more complicated than that, and that's possibly true. But he's a complicated figure historically, but also, I mean, just a model of productivity. I mean, the the amount this guy got through in his lifetime is just astounding. You read about him, you read about Snorri, and you just the combination of his political activity back and forth between Iceland and
Hmm.
Norway, the things that he's doing in Iceland, sort of running or helping to run his kind of family cartel as they take over Iceland,
Yeah.
but then also his productivity as a scholar and as a writer and all these other things. He's it's you read him and it's almost like he had 3 lifetimes to do this in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you really wonder when the guy, and then also was doing things like designing buildings with secret passages so he could get out to his hot tub in the middle of winter without having to walk through the snow. I mean, just an amazing sort of Renaissance man.
Yeah. I mean, he's a really good example of, I think people take for granted just how full a life could be in the Middle Ages.
Hmm.
And he is a prime example of just how completely you can live a life. Whether you're doing that for the good or for your own self-interest or whatever, that's I guess up to historians to decide. But man, Snorri has such a
That's us,
fascinating
Andy.
life.
That's actually
That's
our
us,
job.
yeah.
That's
That's actually the question that she asked us, right? Was,
yes.
what do we make of him? I think his story is so fascinating because he's fostered as a young boy by one of Iceland's richest, most wealthy, most influential men, and introduced into this whole new lifestyle, and given the connections to education and to Norway. And that really pushes him forward. It's fascinating to see how from this little move by his father to put his son into a position can change the whole course of Icelandic history. Um, the Snorri Sturluson story is fascinating. I wish there was more attention given to him.
You've been to Reykholt, I presume.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
there's not a lot out there. It's like,
no,
he could be productive out there, I think, because what are you gonna do besides sit in
yeah.
that pool? Like, there's not a lot. It's like completely out in the middle of nowhere.
And the cold
Yeah,
invigorates.
Yeah.
cold invigorates. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You
Yeah. I
definitely
guess.
get a sense for why Iceland was so productive in storytelling and
Yeah.
literary production and
Yeah.
history because those dark, cold winters. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Once you've carded all your wool and all that and
Yeah.
got the fires going, it's
Yeah.
time to tell stories.
Actually,
Yep.
CJ, you and I've talked about that before. I think you said it, like, and I just mentioned this to my husband Tom a couple of days ago, and I can't remember why now, but I'm like, if anybody from now gets transported back to the Middle Ages, the number one problem they've got is boredom. Nobody now knows how to deal with boredom, or the life that is just so much slower. But then, I mean, they have, I guess, their distraction is, survival. Just
Yeah, exactly. You have to
Right.
produce
staying warm.
everything.
No hot
Yeah,
water,
like
right? No running hot water.
Hey, in Iceland, they got hot water that comes right out of the ground.
Oh, I guess so.
that's
That's
true.
true. I don't know.
Yeah.
My water turned off for 2 days, and I was like, I'm not going to make it a third.
Well, I like Snorri. I have to say, I'm a little bit of an apologist for Snorri, just because, well, I'm an apologist for Iceland, period, because I love the place
Mhm.
as a kind of a second home. But I think Snorri, I mean, so the poor little guy, gets murdered, and it's only like what, 1240, 1241. I mean, so he's not that long living wise after our nominal end of the Viking Age. And so it's not
Right.
like one of these people who are like, oh, you can't believe Snorri because like everything he's writing about happened like 10 million years before he's writing about it. It's like, yeah, come on. There's people still there with like maybe some living memory or knew somebody who had living memory, something
Mhm.
like that. But also, he doesn't write. I mean, he's Christian by that point, obviously, and he's a historian and all these other things that he is, but he's not like highfalutin in that he's going to write it in Latin or something. And so
Right,
I mean, he's documenting his own people at a time when there's a lot of change going on. And I think I want to give him the benefit of the doubt of at least trying to do right by them. And, sort of, yeah, documenting it before it sort of slips away. So
I think
yeah,
that's all true, and he's definitely positioning Iceland as an asset and a value on the broader stage, but specifically the Scandinavian stage, um, highlighting the connections they have historically through their genealogies to the great families of Norway. That's essential. They're also in most of those stories some of the bravest, wisest, most clever characters that the kings of Norway encounter. These are the men that the kings of Norway can rely on.
yeah,
So there's a lot being done there to preserve the history and culture of Iceland through Snorri. A lot being done to position Iceland as a worthy player in the broader political games of medieval Europe. Um, but it's also fairly self-serving, most of what he's doing. He is writing history through his when he's doing it through his own lens
well,
to
everybody does
position
that though.
things.
Come on, man, that's the
Exactly.
historian's game.
Exactly. That's the whole trick. Yeah.
One of,
But
one of my
I'm
favorite.
with you. I want to say I'm with you, Terry, that I have evolved in terms of like my initial impression of Snorri as being kind of this guy who, in some ways, betrays Iceland to Norway. To really, in looking at when he comes home, when he breaks with the King of Norway, I feel to me like he's coming home with a very different mindset. Even knowing that he's likely going to be killed for his betrayal, but that he's attended the king. He's seen what the king's all about. He's seen what the dangers of playing with kings might be. And so he comes back, and I think that Ale Saga, if written by Snorri, as we assume that it is a real study of that experience of the dangers of dealing with kings and this desire to keep Iceland. I don't want to, not necessarily independent, but at least keeping
Yeah,
Iceland, preserving something of what Iceland is.
yeah,
I really admire that. I think it's
yeah. And then he
great.
gets taken out in like a mob hit, man.
That's right. Yeah, which is such a fascinating story, right?
Poor
I
guy.
think one of the
It
things that
solves it.
really helps to illustrate who he was is when he writes his Edda, which as you say, he's trained to be, he's sort of educated to be a member of ostensibly the Christian Church, uh, and sets out to write down everything he can about the myths of the Norse gods, but then writes a cover sheet for that in which he tries to justify it by saying that they're actually heroes descended from the Trojan War, that they
Mhm.
escaped from Ilium after the fall of Troy,
Yeah.
made their way north, and their exploits were so widely thought of and so widely celebrated they became like gods. After that page, they're gods, right? It is literally just a cover sheet in case the bishop comes by and has a look at what he's doing.
That's right.
serves no further purpose apart from that. And it never sort of comes up again in the course of the writing. But it is sort of, he's doing, his project is equal parts preserving the past, national as well as self-aggrandizement, and also a
Hmm.
willingness to, manipulate and sort of reshape things to fit a form that allows him to do what he wants to do. That's a pretty good metaphor for his political career too.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I actually had somebody comment on something I wrote about historical fiction because I taught a course on chivalry and we went over some of the medieval literature. And Chrétien de Troyes is, I guess, sort of famous for coming up with like what we would consider the first historical fiction literature out there, right? The father of historical fiction, which is the genre I write in.
Yeah.
But somebody made a comment on a post I put up uh, saying, and I don't know that this is true. In fact, I would argue against it, but and I will. But the saying, the people at the time, there was no fact versus fiction. Everything kind of lived in the same place, so they weren't really,
Mm.
they wouldn't have thought of it as making things up. So thinking about Snorri, I think that's an interesting thought. Thinking about Snorri and his self-aggrandizement and some of the things that we would consider fiction today being put in there. I wonder how much of that was just him transposing his worldview, his bias on it, not intending to make it seem fictitious or false. Or the alternative, which is I'm convinced people have been making shit up since the dawn of humanity.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, how much of it is just him actually saying, I'm going to make this up for real? And then like excitedly going to somebody else and saying, look at this wonderful story I wrote. Isn't it great? And then we're looking at it and then we're like, what part of it is true? And it's like, no, it's a
Right.
Tolkien.
Yeah.
We absolutely know, and I think you were just hinting at this, that we absolutely know that people at various points in the past did differentiate between factual history, imagined history, fanciful history, and
Absolutely.
outright fiction. Right? These were all sort of mental
Look at
categories, if
the
not sort of active genres. I mean, when Geoffrey of Monmouth
look
writes
at
his
the
history of the English kings in the early
That's what
12th
I was gonna
century,
say.
I mean, he creates this entire history once again. It's all about descendants of Troy making their way out into Europe and starting new civilizations. But he creates this whole complicated history. He introduces the story of King Lear into Britain, where it had been previously a Celtic thing. He introduces Arthur, who had also previously been a Celtic and Welsh story. He introduces all this stuff and makes it part of British history. Lots of other writers in the 12th century go anywhere from kind of ironic, right? So I wonder why no one else has ever reported all this history, to William of Malmesbury calling him the father of lies. I mean, they recognize the difference between history as we understand it, history as someone like Bede, who was very highly respected as an historian, and the kind of history that Geoffrey of Monmouth is doing, in which it is largely about collecting fun stories that are sort of vaguely set in the past, like raisins in a pudding.
Hmm.
That he's recognized as not being the same kind of historian. They did understand a distinction there, and objected to it being sort of manipulated.
Like
Yeah.
Saxo.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and if Snorri is educated, as we are fairly sure that he was, then he would have been studying the same kind of text that Abede was studying, that talks in great detail about what is history and how one composes history. So he knows the difference between fact and fiction, and he knows the value of writing history that sounds like fact, right? Even if it
Hmm.
is fiction. So there's that potential to manipulate and adapt the history to purpose.
So it's fairly safe to say that anything fantastical that he's inserting serves a really specific purpose from his point of view, even if we can't quite dissect what that would have meant to him at the time. It's got some sort of purpose. It's not that he's like literally a flat earther, right? Like, I mean,
Right.
this is obviously false, but 30% of the population believes it's true, right? And there's people writing about it. In 1,000 years, maybe somebody will dig up somebody's computer and
Yeah.
be like, wow, everyone must have thought the earth was flat.
Hmm.
Right?
Well, I think, yes,
Yeah, I think
pseudo-historical anecdotes serve the same role in medieval histories as authorial interpolations do in modern histories, right? That it's a
mhm,
commentary. It's a way of thinking about and reflecting on the dry fact that you've just reported, right? They did it with these anecdotes that had a kind of tangential relationship to reality. We do it with these, what we like to think of as impartial observations, which are always informed by our own biases, our own culture, our own time.
mhm.
And it's remarkably easy to spot when a historian from 100 years ago is doing that. But we always like to pat ourselves on the back and say that we've now learned and we don't do that anymore. And it's sort of
Mhm.
the inevitable chain of history that 100 years from now, our biases will be glaringly obvious to the students of a future generation.
Yeah, that's exactly the piece I mentioned earlier that you guys kind of sparked when I wrote about the BJ 581. It was all criticizing people for projecting our own sort of desires for shield maidens to exist onto the past.
Yes,
Because but there's a
that's right.
long history. I mean, arguably since humans have been writing histories, I mean that's what people do, right? It's
That's right.
it's the Holy Grail is objectivity, and it's a Holy Grail for a reason. You're never going to get there.
That's right.
Spoilers.
Mhm. Well, so we haven't really actually talked about the sagas, and I had a question for you that I planned ahead of time because I thought this would be kind of fun to do, and you can decide who gets to tell which story. But since you have done such a deep dive on the sagas, the question I have is, what is a story in the sagas that would seem to us today to be quite contemporary, where we would say this seems like very normal behavior? And
Mhm.
then in opposition to that, what's a story in the sagas that makes absolutely no sense to us today, if there is one? Or what's
Ooh.
the one that would seem the most alien to us, where we're like, this, what?
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna give a what I think for most Saga fans might be both a disappointing answer because it's not that creative, but also it's the logical answer for me. In Njal Saga, you have this feud that ends in the burning of Njal and his wife and some of his family in his house. Very, very famous story. Um, that whole feud starts from just uh, insults, and this happens frequently in the sagas. That someone's pride is hurt, and they take it's an affront to them, and it starts out with just a I'm going to get some kind of vengeance. Maybe it's going to start out as just a verbal vengeance. I'm going to insult them back. I'm going to spread rumors about them. Well, those rumors also hurt, and those rumors lead to fights where the little people get injured along the way. But that hurts someone's pride even more, and so it escalates and it continues to escalate. I think there's a really good observation of human behavior and a human understanding of emotion and our desire for justice and personal justice in that saga and in all of the sagas that really deal with that problem quite frequently, where something small, like you let your sheep graze on my land, now I need to get justice for that, and that's going to end up with someone getting killed. Oftentimes, very, very important major political players end up getting involved as a result of that kind of stuff. That all feels very real and very logical to me.
Mhm.
What about you, John?
No, I agree. I think one of the things the sagas do really well is allow the reader to do the work of understanding how human emotion, human pride, all the frailties that make us up lead to these major events. Right?
Hmm.
It's so common in medieval writing to ascribe that kind of thing to supernatural or divine forces. And in the sagas, that is not how it works, right? People get into conflict because they are fighting over where a sheep gets to graze. They get into a conflict because someone suggests that someone else's wife is not sufficiently attractive, or that somebody is a subpar lawyer. And because of that, right, pride gets hurt and things snowball. But it's all very much at a human level. And I think that part of the sagas reads very, very well with a modern audience. It makes a great deal of sense. It rarely, in the best sagas, I should say, it rarely feels sort of narratively forced, right? The plot doesn't drive the characters drive the plot. And that's
Hmm.
one of the kind of rules of great fiction in the modern day, right? Is that the characters should act in ways that are realistic and drive the plot. But you also asked about unrealistic things. I'm going to go obscure on this one. Sandy went Njal Saga because we could also do Njal Saga, right? There's also the literary quality of Njal Saga is the creation of Nemesis, right? Right at the beginning of Njal's career, he helps his best friend to get back a dowry that his cousin feels she's owed after divorcing a man named Hrut Herjolfsson. That dowry allows her to remarry. The man she marries is Valgrith Grey, and their son is Morth Valgridsson, the guy who then grows up to destroy Njal and Gunnar. It's this really sort of well laid out structure in this saga that is Nemesis, right? Is the exact idea of Nemesis. So certainly the Njal saga has that kind of quality. But I think if we're gonna go crazy, I mean, Ref the Sly saga is a steampunk Viking who builds militarized duck boats that can reverse direction in midstream. He has a garage, sort of mechanized garage door that can slam down on his opponents and crush them, while he then drives over them in his duck boat. I mean, the whole saga is just crazy. He's got a fire suppression system built into the walls of his fort. Amazing stuff, and it's all being imagined sort of by a person in the 14th century, right? It's very crazy and ahistorical, but it's being imagined through a medieval mind, and so it's what a medieval person thinks of as fun steampunk story. There's also, to get really obscure, Andy, do you remember Thorsten Bullleg's Tale? This is
No.
a short story that we covered.
Oh wait, this involves
is the
like
guy
the
who
fight outside with the ghosts and stuff.
well, wait, no, this is so Thorsten Bullsleg is he is the son of a mute woman who later gains the ability to talk after her son wins a magical seed after delving into a grave and taking part in a weird life-size board game of 23 warriors dressed in black and red who murder each other every night in this grave. He rescues the seed, and thus his mother is able to speak. He also, at one point, this is a Beowulf analog, by the way, to go back to the beginning of everything, invades a den of trolls, and at one point, one of the trolls vomits into his mouth, after which he's able to shapeshift. I mean, there's just
Great.
madness abounding in this story, and virtually none of it makes any linear sense to a modern reader, but it's all fantastic.
There were gallons of mead that went into the production of that.
Now, where can we find these?
All the stuff with all those stories? John, where's Thorstein's Bullleg?
I mean,
available?
I believe it's one of the ones that's published in that Penguin volume.
The big one?
The big Sagas of Icelanders.
The Jane Smiley one?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it could be in there.
If anyone listening has ever been to Iceland or to an airport in Scandinavia, you're probably going to find copies of this book for sale.
Exactly.
There's usually stacks of it available at any bookseller in an airport in Scandinavia. And it's sort of a collection of some of the more popular sagas and some of the more popular Thauta, these short stories. But you can also,
that one's not in here though, John.
It's of course published in there as well.
Or you can go online to sagadb.org and read like the 19th century translations of some of these, and how the Scandinavians 1200 years ago were going thee and thou and all of that.
Yeah.
Right.
This collection does have Thorstein Shiver in it, where the guy goes to the outhouse and the devil pops up out of the toilet to talk to him, or the demon.
Yes.
That's a great one. So I think to CJ, all the supernatural stuff that's incorporated into the sagas is always a fantastic thing. That while certainly not realistic to the modern audience, it makes a lot of these stories really pop and makes them entertaining.
Actually, we're going to be talking in December to Arina Menea, who's a Norse specialist. She's a Romanian scholar, and that's what she specializes in is,
Cool.
the Draugr and, all that kind of supernatural stuff. So we'll get some ghost stories out of her, I'm sure.
She's from Romania. That tracks. So we might get into the vampire. That was when I did the roundtable in Leeds, and they had authors kind of who run the gamut on historicity, right? So on one side, there's me and Justin Hill, and we're kind of we toe the line, stay historical. And then on the far left, there's a gal, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she wrote like Vikings and vampires, right? And so we all had different opinions on how historical fiction should be. Still counts as historical fiction with the vampires, And I after that, this is in 2017. I actually bought her first book and read it. It was fun. It was a lot of fun, but it was
Yeah.
also like this doesn't have any basis in reality. So it's kind of
Right.
actually we could almost apply this question of how historical should historical fiction be to the Icelandic sagas, right? Because you've
Oh,
got Njal
absolutely.
Saga and Egil Saga, which are kind of these make sense, right? And then these
Mhm.
really off ones where it's like vampires, Draeger. Right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and
But I
we know
think
from William and Rainer, the whole burning them out of their house is a real thing, right? Like
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
they did their little experiment, like, what, a summer and a half ago, and actually
Yeah.
burned some, and they were shocked at like, whoa, this is really effective.
It's pretty serious. Yeah. I always
Yeah.
like how, how often you hear like, this was the worst thing that a person could do, but then everybody does it. Like everybody's burning everybody out of the, like last year, like they're not coming out. What am I going to do? I'm not going to let them get away. So
well, but
burn them.
although you're
Well, as
doing the
far as
sagas of
I understand,
Portugal saying this is wrong, we should not be doing this.
yeah, no, as far
Well,
as
it's
I
obviously
understand,
wrong.
yeah, well, from what sense? Like Christian morality, or I mean, I think
True. Yeah.
the sense that I get from a lot of these sagas, and actually talking to Rainer and stuff too, a bunch, is just that, like, is it overt or covert? That's what like sort of makes the mark
Exactly. Yeah.
there, right? If you're kind of trying to be sneaky and underhanded and get away with something, that's
Yeah.
bad. But if you just openly
Well,
kill, or you announce you're going to do it or something, then it's like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
that's
exactly.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, we just did for Halloween the tale of Dreams of Thorstein Sidahausen, and in that one there is a slave who has been gelded by his master, and he hides and hides and hides, and the dreams are telling the Thorstein that someone's coming to kill you. It's this guy. He hides and it's under darkness when everyone's asleep. Same with the like Gisli saga, right? It's under in darkness at night when everyone's sleeping. It's a covert killing that is the worst kind of killing that you can do.
Yeah.
Whereas Ale is all about I'm going to kill you. I'm going to tell you I'm going to kill you, and then I'm going to kill you, and you can try to stop me, and that's okay if he pulls it off.
I find Ahil very hard to like all the way through.
You're not alone. You're not alone.
He's just a bully, and I mean, obviously, right? I mean, he what kills his first person when he's like 6 or 7 years old.
Yes.
Um, Burns down the ship of, who was it, his uncle, who he wants to go with him and they won't take him. And so it's like, fine, I'll just destroy your ship. I'm like, what the hell, dude? God.
Yeah,
He's a
he's
bundle of
very grumpy.
contradictions, Azale.
Well, and
Yes.
then at the end, and that's the one I'm familiar with the most, although I like Laxdœla
Mhm.
Saga a lot too, but because of where I stay when I'm in Iceland, I mean,
Mm.
Mosfellsdalr is my home there,
Yeah.
and like literally across the street from, Jesse and David, where they found the chieftain's
Oh yeah.
hall and whatever. But I was thinking, because all the legend in the valley there of, like, where's Ael's treasure buried, kind of,
Yes.
and I'm like, read the end of that story. He went out with two slaves. He's blind, his little treasure chest and a horse, and then they find him wandering around because he's blind, and there's, no treasure and there's no slaves. I'm like, come on, this is obvious. The slaves took the treasure and like skipped town, man. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, I'm out here in the middle of the night with an old blind guy. Like, I'm just gonna take his money and run.
Wow, that really undercuts the end of the story, Terry. I don't know.
No treasure hunting for you,
Poor
Terry.
Ale.
Yeah,
No.
no. Yeah.
It's all right. More for me when I find it.
Yeah.
That's it. That brings up an interesting question about the regulation of violence, right? This idea of covert versus uh, overt versus covert, right? That's
Mhm.
something that I wrestle with in my novels. Is I have a character who is has evolving spiritual conditions that are happening to within, without, but then also like his job is he's a killer. That's what he
Mhm.
does. It's he acquires wealth through conquest. So he's um, a disagreement there, and that's something that we see later in the Middle Ages with, for example, knights and chivalry. Right?
Yeah.
How do you remain a pious Christian, but then your actual profession is the ability to kill another human being? So do we
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
that? Do we see that explored in the Icelandic sagas about trying to wrestle with these questions, like Egil, for example, behaving badly, but then also acknowledging that bad behavior is essentially what makes him good at what he does for a living, which is to go a
Mhm.
Viking.
We certainly have people
I was
who
gonna,
are hesitant or who differentiate between sort of appropriate violence and inappropriate violence, right? There are targets that are inappropriate. There are ways of attacking people that are inappropriate, like the burning we were talking about before. There are regulations, and certainly there are regulations about how to kill correctly, right? There's a huge legal distinction between killing and murder. And it's you do not want to be on the wrong side of that line because one is sort of the work of an honorless person and a person who really has no right to legal protection. The other is very often not only justifiable, but may even be at least tacitly celebrated as this is the right thing for this person to have done. This killing had to be done. But it's very much individual. We also get people, who are subject to things like berserk rages in the sagas. Um, Ale is a good example of this, right? I mean, nobody goes through more berserk rages, I think, in a saga than Ale does. But we also have people like Thorir Goatleg in Vatnsdal Saga, who is a berserk and sees it as a curse, does not wish to be berserk, because it makes you a bit of a problem socially, right? People like a berserk around when there's killing to be done, but otherwise, you don't really want berserks around. You certainly don't want a berserk marrying your daughter, right, or providing you with half berserk grandchildren. Um, and so Thor asks his older brother what to do about it. And his older brother eventually finds him an orphan to raise and says, "All right, so, your job is to take care of this baby. You're no longer allowed to lose control of yourself." And that works. Right? He finds a way to externalize his sort of focus when he needs to regain control of himself and keep control of himself, and he never has another berserk rage for the rest of his life. So they understood. I mean, again, within the context of these sagas that are questionably historical. I mean, the whole idea of berserks is very questionable as an historical event, but they certainly made the distinction in their stories between violence or killing or propensity for violence that was socially acceptable, and then that which is not.
yeah. And I think one of the things that I enjoy most about classical and medieval literature is the investment in explorations uh, of human psychology and motivation in particular, right? So what distinguishes one action as right versus another that's wrong? So much of it comes down to motivation and the quality of the emotions that inspired the action, right? Um, my studies of Beowulf, in particular, going back to Beowulf, look at that text as a warning. It's a text about the transition from one culture to the next. It's a text, even if it is a purely it's an artifact of warrior culture. It's talking about what it means to be a good leader. It's talking about how to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And is your motivation purely selfish? Is it purely driven by an anger? And what is the quality of that anger? And how do we understand when we're seeking vengeance in the right way and when we're seeking it in the wrong way? And what are the repercussions of doing it incorrectly? It's usually everybody dies. That's what that great all the great Germanic stories of the classical medieval period are everybody dies because they didn't communicate properly, they didn't regulate their emotions properly, their motivations were incorrect, and so it leads to these great tragedies that we celebrate. But we as readers, and I think these stories invite conversations to understand why did the character behave the way they did, where did they go wrong, and then how can we absorb that into our own life and the way that we handle our own difficult situations and our
Yeah,
own
I think one of the things
emotions.
that
And I
people
think the sagas do that
often
really well.
I think one of the things that people often miss about Beowulf, to stick with that for a second, is the fact that the poem doesn't necessarily approve of Beowulf. That when Grendel's mother comes for revenge and kills Ashura, kills Hrothgar's closest advisor and oldest friend, the saga, the narrator tells us it is no good bargain that both sides should deal with the lives of friends. Both sides should suffer loss. uh, the next morning, Hrothgar gives this beautiful eulogy that, as in every excellence, in everything that you would hope a warrior would be, so Ashura was. Without him, I'm lost. There's no point to any of this anymore. And Beowulf comes storming in and says, "Cheer up! It's always better to kill someone than to mourn too much." And it's very clear that no one, from the narrator down to the other people in the room, think that this is an appropriate response. But this is Beowulf's kind of the one note he knows how to play is, well, but if we kill them, that'll solve the problem. And so the text invites you to critique that point of view, the idea that violence is always the solution.
Is that what Hasting is, CJ, then? It's like he's kind of a one-note guy?
No, no, no. He's Christianizing. He's got deep like inner turmoil because he grows up between two different worlds. He's constantly riding a line between the two.
Mm.
But then but what's kind of fun is that I play with this idea that the conflict that he has in one culture, right, is an asset in the other. And so then as he kind of flits back and forth between the two, then it's his inner turmoil just gets that much more fuel, right? Because he's just really trying to figure out, he's kind of the inner battle between the light and the dark, trying to figure out what is the next right thing to do. And that's actually, I'm writing a book right now where he's struggling with that, and he's kind of useless, and all of the people around him are like, "What's wrong with you?" Right? Like,
Yeah.
we should kill them because they're trying to kill us. And he's like, "But I don't feel like killing today." Like
Yeah.
it's just kind of one of those. So that's where he's going. Just to go back on something you mentioned, Andrew, about the Germanic tales of they do something wrong or they don't do it the right way, so everybody dies. In Germany, that hasn't changed. I recently saw he's a German comedian who's actually funny. Didn't think I'd ever see one in my lifetime. But he went through and did this old story. He had like a nursery book from his childhood, and he was going through it. And he says, "This is how German stories work." It says, "Oh, look at little Greta. She's playing with matches, and her parents say, 'No, it's bad to play with the matches. Something's going to go wrong.' And then we turn the page, and oh no, she's on fire. And the next page, oh, she's dead." End.
Yeah. Now the question is, I'm guessing that's meant to be funny, and it is.
Yeah. It's hilarious. It's
And what does that
hilarious.
reveal about us? That is can be pitched in a way that's funny.
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Fate is sometimes like that,
Mhm. Yeah, that same comedian always thought, he'll film his family, and if anybody tries to point with their right hand, he just yells "Nine," because they're like, "Oh, look, no."
Wow.
So you guys are going to be doing something in Iceland. Tell us about that.
Yes. Yeah, so we spend so much time on the podcast talking about kind of the landscapes. I spend way too much time looking at Google Earth or like maps of satellite imagery and calculating distances between one place and another just to get a sense of like what is the lived experience of these characters when the text says they went this way, and I want to know what that felt like or what that looked like, right? How many hills are they going over? All of that kind of stuff. So that topographical information is fascinating to me. So I bring that to the podcast. And then when we visited Iceland, you get a much deeper appreciation and a great sense of the world that these characters lived in and how the stories could evolve from just being in that space. So we've talked about that stuff a lot, and we've had requests to try to lead some kind of tour or do some kind of saga thing experience in Iceland. So we've made that a reality now. We're going to be leading a saga thing tour in April of next year, where we're going to go through the sagas of Snæfellsnes Peninsula, mainly because that one's very accessible and those are some people's favorites. It's also Ale Saga, Borgarnes is on the way, and we can go to Mosfell as well. And talk about Ale and look for his lost treasures. So yeah, we'll be going to Iceland in April, touring some of the great saga sites and checking out some of the passages that happened in those particular places, just gaining a greater appreciation for this literature in the place where it was written and hopefully experienced.
It's so important. I totally agree with you so much, especially as a teacher. I'm always like making these stupid videos when I'm there, for my
Yes.
students, with literally my husband either with his GoPro or his phone, and it's just me like
Yeah.
riffing off the top of my head. But the most important thing is like I'm trying to give you a sense of place. It's so important.
Yeah.
And I did a study abroad with a colleague just this last time I was in Iceland a couple of months ago, and took students who had taken my Viking history class out to Thingvellir, and it's like,
Hmm.
here, this is where it happened. I mean,
Yeah.
this is such an extraordinary place. But even from the sagas, I mean, because like literally, like I said, I mean, I live across the street from Risbru, which is the farm where they think Egil's
Yeah.
place, last place was. But my husband and I went up and on the peninsula out to Snæfell and also, but in Laxdale, and it's so beautiful there. And it's
Oh,
like,
it
yeah,
is.
I
Yeah.
can see why people would end up in this valley and go, yeah, this is a great
Absolutely.
place to have a farm and live.
Oh yeah, there's such you can see where the rich places even now, like when you're driving in the south in Saga territory, or if you go up to Laxdal,
Yeah,
you can get a sense of why these were attractive spots
yeah,
for the settlers and for the people that lived in the subsequent generations, because that's where the grass grows, that's where things are green, that's where things are beautiful. It's stunning territory.
yeah. Or even in the far south, like where Snorri was fostered. It's really beautiful down there in the south
Exactly. Yeah.
coast. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
So
Wow,
yeah,
that
and
sounds
if
really
people are
exciting.
interested, they can check out our website, sagathingtours.com, sagathingtours.com, and you can sign up. We've only got 15 spots available, so space is limited because we're trying to create a fairly intimate experience for our guests.
Okay. Well, we can put the link in our show notes if you want, or if
Yeah,
you're
thank
afraid
you.
you're going to get overwhelmed, we won't do that. So
I don't think we'll get overwhelmed once they see the cost.
We're not that big a draw.
No,
yes, Iceland is a very expensive place these days. It always kind of has
it
been, but it
is.
seems more so even these days. It's kind of
Oh yeah,
crazy.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Fun.
So,
And when's that tour
wow.
happening?
April.
That tour is happening from April 20th to the 24th, I believe that are the dates there.
Well, I'm glad you have the dates in your head. Good job.
I do, yeah,
That's
yeah.
fun.
Well, I put a lot of effort into this particular thing. So yeah, we're going to start out in Reykjavik, kind of tour some of the sites in Reykjavik. We're going to go to the museums and kind of contextualize those, really building that settlement story while we're in Reykjavik. Then we're going to go to Reykholt and do the Snorri thing, spend some time in Borgarnes, and then dive into primarily the main sagas that we're interested in are Eyrbyggja Saga and Bardar Saga Snæfellsás, which is a very supernatural, fun little story. So yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Nice. Do you have everything lined up in Iceland? I mean, if you need some people or tour guides or anything like that, I mean, I can certainly
Yeah, John
help
and I
out.
are going to be the main tour guides, and then we have our buddy Bjorn Grimson. He's an experienced tour guide over in Iceland, and he's also a Saga Thing fan. So
Yeah.
we're going to team up with him. He's going to drive the tour bus and add some patter where John and I stumble.
We know those people too, CJ. That's what Rainer's doing these days, driving the tour bus.
Is he? Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Rainer, what's the Vikings' favorite weapon? A rock.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true. It is.
Yep. Just
Whatever
anything
you can
that's
Yeah.
reach.
yep. Yeah, yeah. Well,
Why not?
thanks for coming on our show today. Appreciate it.
Real pleasure.
Absolutely.
Good to
Thanks for having
chat with
us.
you guys again. It was fun the first time. It's fun the second time.
Yeah.
We'll have to do it
Yes.
again.
Yes. This was less chaotic, so that's good. Nobody died. So
Right. I
Yeah.
say we all lived through this one. This is great.
I can't believe
yeah.
my character lived through the whole thing. At the end, I was going to call Ian and do what Harrison
Like
Ford did
how did that
to
happen?
George Lucas. Listen, buddy, you got to kill me. Yeah.
That's great. Well,
So.
thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.